Hello and welcome back to the Cine Skinny. It's the film podcast from the Skinny magazine. It's the full team today. Me, Peter, with Jamie, Anahit, and Ellie. How is everybody?
Very well.
Good.
Good stuff. Brat summer continues apace. It's currently absolutely pissing it down outside the EIFF window here at Summer Hall. I believe this is our last one at Summer Hall.
Yeah.
Because we're dying.
We're closing the podcast down.
The mood is good.
We've all brought the Kool-Aids.
Jamie's on one. Jamie's got his Brat green water bottle. He doesn't care what any of us. So yeah, on today's episode, we've got a couple of actually good films for a change. After the time that I picked the shit ones, I do still feel partly personally responsible for that.
No, you should.
I also blame Russell Crowe, but you know.
Sure, yeah. Oh, yeah, that was a bad week.
Yeah.
But also, it's healthy for your gut's microbiome to watch a bad film.
Let's not get back into the mud eating discussion. We are talking about Crossing, which is a new film from Levan, Akin. We are talking about I Saw the TV Glow, the much talked about Jane Schonebrun film, and maybe a little bit on the EIFF program as well, ahead of a fuller chat about it in the fullness of time. But first, what has everyone been watching? Ellie, you asked me just before we came on mic, are we doing this bit? Okay, I'll quickly put something together. So, hit me.
So, I've been watching The Bear Season 3, and the reason that I was a little bit unsure about what I would say is because I don't want to come across too harsh on it, but I really didn't have a good time. I was really quite bored.
A lot of people say that.
I guess without giving away too much spoilers, there is many spoilers to give away because not a lot happens. The first episode that we have long anticipated from this season, the premiere, is what is ostensibly a montage of flashbacks, some of which we've already seen, and some of which they rehired the cameos like Joel McHale to provide new scenes of this flashback that also do not add anything to them, really. So it's kind of still doing its really, really wonderful work with cinematography and editing and that sort of technique where they show the food being prepared excruciatingly closely, almost like this ASMR video, so that the audience feels as rewarded as the chefs do in the hard work that goes into this food. But it sort of feels like the focus is too narrow, it's too zoomed in on its own sort of style and less on its substance. Not a lot happens in the season. The characters don't necessarily feel like they're, virtually all the main characters are sort of trapped in their own little dilemmas about which path to take, and none of them feel particularly convincing. And yeah, again, I don't really want to spoil it, but we kind of watched all the way to the end, and I'm quite shocked at just how sort of there are so few emotional peaks and troughs in the season finale compared to season 2, which was just mind-blowingly good. They, again, like I say, pull back some really interesting actors and performers in who have made cameos earlier in the show, and they're there again doing their thing and being great, but it felt really significant when they first appeared, but again, they're not necessarily adding anything new. So yeah, I don't know. The Bear Season 3, not a fan, really. Kind of feel like they've lost the point, and I don't know, some clever food allegory about how this one's gone off.
Oh no.
I've only seen the first 3 episodes in the new series, and I haven't enjoyed them as much as previous ones. Also, they're still doing my least favourite thing in all of television, which is those horrible crossfades that they do that look like they're out of Windows Movie Maker. Mm-hmm. They suck so bad. Just cut from one thing to... I nearly knocked my laptop in the air. Just cut from one thing to another.
I am going to stick up for the bear. Shocker. And be
Go on.
I think it's doing something that I will agree that it's not as show-stopping, and I also don't think it is as good as the first 2 seasons, but I think it is doing something very clever in how it thinks about trauma. In the first 2 seasons were the real kind of adrenaline peak highs of kind of post-trauma where everything is happening and you're feeling everything, and there is always a very boring period when something horrible has happened to you, where you are stuck in the same cycles and loops and nothing is really happening. And I felt like it captured that really well. But I will say anything for a man I fancy. I should make that so abundantly clear.
I mean, I'll happily concede that I think it's episode 6 is called Napkins, directed by Ayo Edebiri.
Yeah.
It's her directorial debut. And it's the best part of the season.
Yeah, Tina's episode is so lovely.
She can do no wrong. She is absolutely crushing it. Because she, I think, was a screenwriter before she became an actor. So it's she's kind of done all sorts of stuff. So, it's not that there's absolutely nothing of any worth in the season. It is still really enjoyable, beautifully shot, really well put together, and still quite contemplative and fun as well. Like, it is, to me, kind of obvious how much Fak seems to be the character that is just around the most. And in a weird way, that, to me, kind of suggests a lot about where we are with the more serious plot lines, where a character who was in the first season essentially the comic relief is now kind of dominating the show with this strange narrative thread about haunting, which is like some jovial thing this family share about mind fucking each other. But like, yeah, that's kind of predominantly the meat of the third season, which just seems a little bit off, considering after season 2 we're all desperate to know where like Richie and Carm will like land on their journeys, but the show does not really want to give that away at this point.
I'm quite smug that I stopped watching this show after episode 3 because I didn't like it at all.
I don't think that the first 2 seasons are
crazy
bad.
takeaway to take from this.
Yeah.
I think Jamie has been fully vindicated by this 4-minute conversation that had some positives. Jamie, what would you like to talk about?
Well, I have been watching... Well, I saw a couple of really good films, actually, because I've been on holiday, so I've just been chilling at home watching movies. But I did watch Maxxxine, which is amazing, really fun. I actually haven't seen the other 2 films in the trilogy. It's Ty West's film. He's working with Mia Goth, set in this kind of like slasher world of Hollywood. This one's set in the 80s. It's about a porn star who's trying to become an actor. She's been directed by Elizabeth Debicki. It's really fun, sexy, cool, kind of swimming in atmosphere of like 80s LA. Doesn't really stick the landing, but it's just like, yeah, just a fun, cool movie. And I think I would probably appreciate it more if I'd seen the first 2 because other characters pop up from the first 2 films. So I was a bit confused. But
I have a quick question. How can you tell they pop up from the other 2 films if you haven't seen them?
Well, I presume they have significance, and there's flashbacks to like the is it X?
Are they like framed in that way where like the camera really obviously zooms in on someone and you're like, who the fuck's this person? Because the worst example I've ever seen of that was in it was maybe in Castle for Christmas. It had like a crossover with one of the other shitty Netflix romantic comedies, and there were these 2 people who checked in at the B&B and they were framed as if they were important, and they just never appeared again.
That was weird.
It's a cinematic universe.
Yeah.
But, well, presumably,
total guff cinematic universe.
Yeah. Thanos shows up.
All the shit films exist in one place. Jamie, I've interrupted you really horribly. Sorry.
Well, you're right. I could be wrong. I need to go back a bit. I enjoyed this so much that I definitely want to go back and watch X in Peril. They passed me by, and I shouldn't have. This is really good. Also, really liked Problemista, the Julio Torres film, which weirdly didn't get released in the UK. It just went straight to streaming. So like I just watched it the other night, and it's excellent. It's like about a young kid from El Salvador who is trying to become a toy maker in New York, but then to get a green card he decides to work with Tilda Swinton's character, who's like this crazy art critic whose husband used to paint eggs, and to make the money that she can afford to sponsor him, they have to put on this exhibition. And it's just kind of crazy and fun and really inventive. And yeah, Torres has got a real kind of interesting sensibility. I think if you like his stand-up, you'll like this. It's just really whimsical and cool. So 2 good films.
Excellent. Is that just on streaming, or did you just find it by some means?
It's a legal route through, I rented it,
Excellent. Good stuff.
I paid £2.50.
Good stuff.
It's okay, we're not cops.
Your Honour, I was having a brat summer. Annie, have you got anything else to add at this stage?
Can I cough really quickly?
Yes.
We should explain I went to Kelburn because I don't know if we'll be able to cut all of the coughing. And I sat close to 2 fires, and I think I have fire damage to my lungs. It's been 10 days and it's not going away. What have I been watching? I rewatched Mask of Zorro. My contractual obligation.
Talking about fandom.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was great. I watched Inside Out 2. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I thought it was very charming and sweet. Maybe not as good as the first, but like, yeah, very cute. And then I've been rewatching The Morning Show because our friend Alex, who, yeah, friend of the pod, gave us, when he loves a TV show, he will talk at you about the TV show for about 2 hours, or a film. Remember when he talked to you about Madam Web? for the
about
whole
how,
of my
about how
party.
Webb connects us up.
Yeah. For truly the entire duration of my book party.
He got me for a bit, but he also got someone else beforehand. I think what you caught was like the start. You caught the start of the like 9:30 show. You caught the end of one, and then.
It was so good. Anyway, he did that for the morning show recently, which he loves, which is utter trash. And I had a friend staying who was convinced by his pitch. So then we started rewatching the morning show. And it is actually really bad. It's not good, but it is very entertaining. So I had a nice time with that. And that's it.
We could actually plug Alex's show on
Yeah, we should. Yeah, he has a show called Cocoon. But then also actually him and Katie Go did a show on the morning show, on another show, I need to stop saying show, on EIFF called Trash Talk, which is Aditi's show, which is about like trash TV. And him and Katie did something about the morning show. And it's like, apparently they spent so long describing the plot of it that Aditi was like, we have to wrap up. Like we've run out of time.
Have you run out of time on a pre-recorded radio
Like truly.
I think we might be able to find out this week.
Anyway, so those are all on EHFM. And that's what I've been doing.
Excellent. And you know what? That's the kind of professional plug that people want when they're looking for new shows on EHFM. I haven't been watching that much, so I could talk very briefly about The Meg with Jason Statham.
Oh, okay.
I talked about The Meg before. The main thing about The Meg is I'm not sure how much research they did into marine biology before they made this film. And also, none of the characters in the film have done any research into marine biology. The number of times that people confuse a very, very big shark with the biggest shark in the world. They'll be like, right, we've just seen the biggest shark in the world. It's like, it's enormous. It's really big. This shark is a unit. You want to catch a load of this shark? This is a grande shark. And then they'll see another shark that is obviously smaller and nowhere near the first one was. And they'll be like, we've got the Meg. Let's fucking go. Rainn Wilson's character shoots a whale and it's like, we've killed the Meg. And it turns out, Ellie, I can see you looking. They haven't killed the Meg.
Oh, no.
And something bad happens to Rainn Wilson's character and all of his henchmen. It's basically a really, really, really not good sci-fi kind of thriller action film in which Jason Statham plays a disgraced former deep sea search pilot who got thrown off the case because he cares too damn much. But then he has to go and help people who are being attacked by a shark. And there's some crap about the thermocline and how they accidentally let Clifford the big red shark loose from underneath this kind of pile of mud. And then it goes hog wild, but then eventually they, spoiler, stop it.
Have you seen The Meg 2?
I've not seen The Meg
All right,
2. I'm really excited to see it.
Exactly. I'm excited to hear your report back.
Oh yeah, if it's anything like that, if it's anything like this one, it'll be extremely low on detail. Probably don't watch The Meg unless you got a bunch of pals with you. But I do want to see, has anyone seen the Netflix shark film about the shark in the Seine?
No.
So there's a French Netflix film about a shark. It's basically, the plot seems to be The Host by Bong Joon-ho, but with all of the intrigue taken out.
And does the shark walk around?
No, it's in the river.
Okay, so just stay at the Seine.
Well, what about all the
you know
tourist
what that is?
boat tours?
That's travel advice from Jamie Dunn. Okay, first film of the week is Crossing, which is a new film from Georgian director Levan Akin. He is the director of And Then We Danced, which was the very good Georgian ballet dancing film from about 5 years ago, and also directed some of the episodes of the new Interview with the Vampire, which Ellie talked about on the podcast a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So there we go. So in Crossing, Leah is a retired teacher on a search for her niece Tekla, who is a transgender woman who left behind her life in Georgia to move to Istanbul. Leah is joined by Akin, who is a young guy who was Tekla's neighbor in the kind of border town that they live on the Georgian-Turkish border. And then Leah and Akin journey to Istanbul and eventually run into Evrim, who is a trans lawyer and activist in the kind of trans community in this part of Istanbul. And the three of them try to track down Tekla as part of Leah's sister's dying wish was to reconnect with her daughter. So Mizia Arabuli is Leah, and two newcomers in their first film roles, Lucas Kankava and Denise Dumanli, play Akin and Evrim. Jamie, I'll come to you first. What did you think of Crossing? You were a big fan of And Then We Danced, weren't you?
I was a big fan, and I think this might be even better. I actually loved this. I thought it was so good. I think I'm just a real kind of sucker for shaggy dog kind of road movies, and that's exactly what that is. It's like, it's an odd couple, who, get this like ex-school teacher kind of battle axe Leah, who's like a drunk and like she's really no nonsense, and then she's teamed up with this kind of sweet doofus guy. And yeah, like watching those two together is really fun. I love how she's always getting drunk and he's always like eating food. He's just like always like scavenging scran. They're just great together. Yeah, and they go this odyssey, and it's what I like about the film is it's like really has a great atmosphere. It really kind of makes you feel like you're in Istanbul. You know, it's really hard, I think, to capture the energy of like a city like that, this huge metropolis. It makes the city feel alive, and it's like them intersecting with all sorts of people. So it starts with their story, but there's lots of other characters who come in, and it's full of little surprises that I didn't expect. So, for example, there's a trans woman, as you mentioned, who appears, this lawyer. She works and helps all these kind of oppressed people, and you assume initially that she is the niece. That's how I took it anyway, and I think that's what you're invited to believe. But then you realise actually he's a different character who's got her own journey. And we just go off and spend some time with her. She like has a shitty boyfriend who dumps her, but then she finds a new guy who's really nice, and then it goes back to the main two, and then we go off with a couple of street urchins. So it's the type of film that's quite loose and sort of it does meander, but in a really lovely way where it just feels like you're hanging out with some really interesting characters and spending some time with them in these kind of little vignettes around town. And even the street urchins surprise you. You assume that these two kids are brother and sister. They seem like they're related, but then later on it turns out they're not. Like one is just like looking after the other, and there's this kind of sense of like found families being discovered all across the city, connections happening. You know, the title Crossing has like many meanings in this film. You know, obviously it's crossing borders, but like crossing genders, but just like paths crossing constantly. And that's a film that had people just ping-ponging around. So I really love that. And I think the location shooting is fantastic. Like Levan really captures the city, and he uses long lenses. So like it feels like, I don't know if this is how he's done it, but it seems like he's just shooting on location with real people. Like, so he's shooting in long lenses and these people are interacting. So all the extras seem like just people of Istanbul who are kind of kicking around, you know, or the cats of Istanbul will pop into the frame, and it seems like all accidental and really natural, you know. So it's got a real kind of realism to it, although it is sprinkled with a few kind of magical moments as well. But yeah, just really great filmmaking. I think like really atmospheric. I kind of just really enjoyed spending time with these kind of characters and sort of like going on the little adventures around town. It was really great.
The fact that it's set in Istanbul means there's so much time on things like ferries and little bits of public transport, and that makes all the stuff about crossing, and you have these different characters kind of coming in and coming out. It makes it all, like you say, it all ties together in a very naturalistic way, because like, why would you be bumping into these people? It's because the way that everyone gets around is on these boats that are constantly going across and down and back, and that's how everyone kind of ends up intermingling. Annie, what did you think?
Yeah, I really loved this. I also loved And Then We Danced. It was the last film I saw in a cinema before lockdown. And I think I went the day that it was clear that lockdown was gonna, and it felt so like subversive. Like it felt so tense to just be in a cinema room. I think I'd been at the Skinny for like 10 days at that point. And the thing I love about that film and this film as well is the way that Akin like captures the physicality of moments. So, And Then They Dance is obviously about these dancers. So you have these like big performance pieces, but it's also the way they like sit and move around each other is like part of what is making that like grammar. And here you have these kind of same moments. There's like dancing in this as well, but there's moments where people are just like leaning out of a window or sitting or being with each other. And there's a sense of everyone is just like very embodied and very tangible. And he's just really good, I think, at capturing like the sensuality of being alive. And Then We Danced, that felt like a very like erotic sensuality. And here it's just a very human one of like what it means to like be in a city. The way that he films light is really fucking beautiful. And yeah, just the sense of like what it means to like exist and be like real in the world. The performances are really, really good, like really fucking gorgeous. I think you were saying that the kid and the lawyer, that was their first film.
I believe so,
which is fucking crazy because they're so good. And he's just like a really compassionate filmmaker. I think he handles these quite big ideas about like homophobia and transphobia, but his films aren't violent, even though they are exploring people that are in some way being confronted with these kinds of violence. There's like a real compassion to them, and he's really zeroing in on each of the characters' feelings. I haven't been to Istanbul. I really, really want to go, but everything I've heard about it, people say it's just fucking huge. Like that's the biggest kind of takeaway you have of it, is it's sprawling. And there's this really interesting sense in this film, like simultaneously, that the city is so big and these characters are like ants in it, like they're insignificant and it doesn't matter because they're one of like millions and millions of people, but they really fucking matter, and everything, the connections they have, the tragedies they're experiencing is so important, and he captures that really well. So yeah, I just thought it was really like lovely.
Yeah.
I had such a nice time. We also can't talk about the ending, but the ending was perfect and beautiful.
I thought the ending was screwed, and then it turned it around. It does something that I thought, oh, has this spoiled it? And then it totally pulls it back.
And then you think that is actually the only way it could have ended.
Yeah.
Like, it's so clever.
I totally see what you're saying about there being an exploration of transphobia or homophobia, but with no violence. Because something that's very unique to our watching experience is that it opens, at least this version, with a disclaimer for the English-speaking audience that Georgian is a gender-neutral language that has no grammatical differentiation between male and female.
Yeah, Farsi is the same, actually.
So,
yeah.
I mean, as someone who only speaks English, or as an audience who speaks, for example, a Romance language, you'll be watching this with the awareness that everything that the characters say about this trans woman they're in pursuit of, everything they say about this woman they've been asked to retrieve is an interpretation. It's largely non-specific, because when you think about it, one of the main ways that English speakers at least signal their transphobia, I guess, is by refusing to recognize the correct pronouns for trans people, which doesn't happen here, right? Like, there are no correct pronouns, there's only the pronouns. So that, combined with the main character, Miss Leah, is it Zia Arabuli? Her kind of like incredibly stoic performance means that she goes on this huge emotional journey, but it's incredibly interior, and it's something that isn't really like divulged in dynamic scenes or arguments or the way she talks about the people that she's looking for. So it's surprisingly quiet in that regard, but at the same time, it is building this very vivid profile of Istanbul with all these like beautiful establishing shots, all this great background noise. We're always like, on a bus or a ferry, and there's just like the roar of the waves or the traffic. We're always like huffing up hills, and there's the cats everywhere that are crawling all over the restaurants and hospitals. So at the same time, like, you have this incredibly like lively, outspoken depiction of the setting, but the characters instead are quite understated. And the events of the plot, there are not many distinct plot beats. It's so much more of a kind of like mood piece of a film, but at the same time, it's like a really wonderful mood piece, and it manages to, with like very little fiercely outspoken plot developments, give a real sense of moving through this vast expanse of place and growing on the way.
Yeah, and a really great depiction of life in a city, and that a city can be enormous, but also you have your little bit. Because as big as Istanbul is, and as much as there's loads of time on the ferry and commuting from one place to another, they're constantly drawn back to these same 2 or 3 streets, because that's how cities work. They're just a bunch of people who are all in the same place at the same time. So, Crossing, it's very, very good. It's in cinemas from this Friday. It's on at the Cameo and at the GFT. There is one screening that has an introduction by Scottish Queer International Film Festival at the GFT. I think it's on the 21st or the 22nd, but I would double check because I've not written it down. And there's also a Turkish coffee afternoon after the 12:30 screening on Friday at the GFT. So that is at the CCA, and it's Ottoman Coffee House, who are having a nice little coffee afternoon so everyone can get together and talk about their experiences of the film.
I wish there was a pistachio baklava afternoon.
I'm sure
that pistachio baklava.
That one bit where he's like hungover and is just eating baklava, and I was like, oh my god, what could be?
and then when he takes some home to her and she's really angry with him, then she's like, oh, but he brought me baklava, so he's a good little boy after all.
It's really nice.
Baklava is truly the currency of friendship.
Also, that tea room is amazing, just like as a building to see, so like it's really fantastic.
So yeah, CCA for that thing after the GFT, but I'll put a note in the show notes of this episode of this podcast.
Oh no,
we're currently doing.
There's another. It's the CCA.
So it's Ottoman Coffee House are doing it, but it's at the CCA.
But I believe there is also free coffee from Ottoman House if you're the first like 50 people or something. I saw that on Twitter, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, if you go on the GFT socials, that'll clarify all of this.
Yeah, we can't be bothered to fact check this right now.
I'll check it afterwards.
We're going to throw things out
I will check this in the edit. Anyway, letterboxd ratings, which we apparently do now, thanks to the mutiny that happened while I was on holiday.
Isn't it better? Don't you think it's
absolutely
better?
it's better. And actually, I updated what's on the letterbox the other day after I hadn't done it for a while. So it's now up to date. So what did everyone think of this? Jamie, out of 5.
I think this is great. This is one of the best films of the year. I'd say 4.5
Okay.
for me.
Ellie.
4.
4. Anahi.
Also 4, I think.
And I also think a 4. It is probably one of the best films I've seen this year. So yeah, very, very good. Levan Akin's done it again. Top stuff.
So that's like an average of 4.
Yeah,
isn't
like
it?
4 stars.
Yeah. Okay, great.
A 4-star banger from the big man. Okay, second film of the week is I Saw the TV Glow. So, in an unnamed US suburb, Owen and Maddie strike up a friendship over The Pink Opaque, which is a late-night supernatural TV drama about 2 women battling evil with the help of a psychic-style connection. As Owen grows up alongside the show, the cracks in suburban life and in Owen's perception of the self and of the outside world begin to kind of show up and manifest themselves. So this is the new film from Jane Schonebrun, who did We're All Going to the World's Fair, and it stars Justice Smith and Bridget Lundy Payne as Owen and Maddie, with various kind of, and they're the 2 lead people in this film, but there are kind of cameos and supporting roles from Conor O'Malley from I Think You Should Leave, Helena Howard from the excellent Madeline's Madeline from a few years back, Lindsay Jordan from Snail Mail plays one of the people who are in The Pink Opaque. Fred Durst off of Limp Bizkit plays Owen's dad, and Amber Benson, aka Tara from Buffy, I'm under your spell, and so on and so forth, has a cameo as the parent of one of Owen's classmates. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, I would say, it's not a spoiler to say, a major touchstone for this motion picture. Ellie, what do you think of this film?
I can't believe you didn't mention Phoebe Bridgers' cameo.
Yes. Oh my God.
Either way, I love this film. This is really interesting. It's a horror film in which the horror of the film is inaction, denial, stagnancy, some really unfilmable concepts, but also scary monster men, evil plots, and weird body horror. It's kind of like a film that I sort of expect. I really don't know where everyone else is going to land on it. I loved it, but it is sort of this real warren of like symbolism and allegory, and some of it is, like you say with the Buffy the Vampire stuff, like very patently obvious. Some of it is a lot more abstract, some of it's very autobiographical, some of it's more universal. It's told out of order, the narrator is unreliable. So I think that people can take all sorts of different things from this, but to like zero in on some concepts, people keep talking about how it has a lot of stuff about transness, but that's not a word that you're going to hear in the film, not just because it's set in the 90s, but because watching The Pink Opaque becomes this sort of metaphorical placeholder for the act of seeking a sense of identity and experimenting with your self-actualization. So it shows transness in a way that I haven't seen shown in film before, right? Like, leaving behind your conservative and patriarchal upbringing is just as fantastical an idea to these characters as the show itself. Transitioning is depicted as kind of horrible and unbelievably intimidating and something that we run from. But at the same time, you know, the alternative, which is the life that we choose to live, is an incredibly like painful and difficult one. But like the demons in the show, The Pink Opaque, we're told they can't hurt you if you don't think about them. Justice Smith as Owen is a really interesting performance as he's trying to kind of like play a character who ages over decades, but at the same time refuses to let himself grow or make decisions for himself. It's a very stark difference to his more playful performances in Detective Pikachu and Dungeons and Dragons. So I think that like this sort of monotony that he upholds will probably cause some density in the viewing experience, but he does deliver some absolutely fucking visceral moments that will jolt you back into the horror of the film. The character kind of overlaps with Jane Schoenbrun's last protagonist in We're All Going to the World's Fair, an adolescent who is inexpressive and sort of soft-spoken, and they're rejects of, you know, late capitalist small-town American life that pushes them towards escapist material like the internet in World's Fair and TV Glow. But what excited me the most about this film really is just what, compared to World's Fair, Schoenbrun is doing with the budget. World's Fair is shot through webcams into bedrooms and using, UV body paint to create its most striking imagery, whereas TV Glow is like a bestiary of practical effects, monster masks, otherworldly lighting, body horror, the slight sort of sensory touch points in World's Fair that are kind of Cronenbergian or Lynchian are really realized and much more Cronenbergian, Lynchian in this. I watched it twice because it's just sort of all over the place in its narrative. So that I'm glad that I did, because, there's little bits of foreshadowing that you don't pick up on that make it a slightly more complete film. And some really impactful scenes I think can get a bit washed out by just the sheer chaos of it all. But at the same time, I sort of wish I didn't watch it twice, because it's an absolute mindfuck, and its most existential parts are now very lucid in my head, and, which is kind of ironic for a film that deeply is about kind of trying to bury your memories and ignore your thoughts. But I really enjoyed it.
Anahit, what did you think?
Yeah,
it's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, I had such a strange experience with it, because there were whole parts of it that I was maybe like not really connecting with, or just felt like it was kind of dragging on a little bit. It also has these like funny tonal shifts, especially towards the beginning. You kind of like almost age, the tone of the film ages with the characters, where it has like a very sort of indie sensibility with like the cute little like writing on the screen, like it's out of a diary or whatever. And then it gets progressively more and more horrible as it goes on. And especially like those middle bits, I was like, I don't really know what is happening. And I kind of just feel it's a bit all over the place. And then as soon as it was over, and the end is really like, but as soon as it was over, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. Like it felt really like settled like under my skin. I think it is like a really potent allegory for kind of trans identity. I think it's a really interesting way of approaching it through this idea of fandom, because there is kind of that sort of safe space that a lot of fandom often is for queer people, where it kind of offers this idea of a newfound family, and I think like Buffy was really, really big with that, right? And Joss Whedon's like kind of further TV shows were as well. And so there's that kind of element to it, but also that sense what is happening in the plot of this TV show and how these characters are contending with it is very, can you accept like how you are identifying with something essentially? So like I think the director has talked about the two characters as being like pre and post like your journey with like your identity and being able to accept it. And I think a lot of the film and the protagonist that we center on is essentially someone that can't, right? Like there's this point, I think Schonebrun talked about it, like described the film as being about like the egg crack, like the moment in a trans person's life when they realize their identity is not how the rest of the world kind of sees them. And it's all about these kind of existential crises of like what happens if you're too scared to like make that step. And that is a horror, actually, if like the society around you and your own psyche doesn't allow you to be yourself. That is a horror film. And I found it so interesting how there was nothing really that horror-y about this film. Like the horror stuff is really like, it's fucking goosebumps shit. Like it's not actually scary, but what it is suggesting as a real life is like so like, oh, that's fucked up. That's so fucked up and so sad. So yeah, I'm not probably being like that eloquent about it because it was just like such a, yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot as a film, but it was really a feeling that I had about it more than like a kind of technical, oh, this is what it's doing. It was just like, oh, you know? I
do know. I kind of feel quite similar. Yeah, I appreciate this film in so many levels. Like the visual invention on this tiny budget is incredible. You know, it's quite really brave to present such a weird, oppressive vibe. Like, you know, it's to be admired to like do that throughout. Like it's really unusual that it decided to do that. And then the needle drops are great. I think the performances are really good. You know, and so I love a lot of it. But yeah, I agree. I kind of struggled with lots of it. I think part of it is it does such a good job of putting you in the shoes of this character who is so anxious, so depressed, so alienated, you know, stuck in sort of like this kind of claustrophobic life, that watching it becomes really quite oppressive. Like I found the sections where we weren't in the TV show, because I love the sections where we go to the TV show, which is just weird and not like Buffy at all. Actually, I think it's much stranger than Buffy, and it's much more like Goosebumps, but even stranger than that, it's like Lynch or something. It's like very bizarre and sort of quite unsettling, and it's and the way that when you're a kid watching something, actually maybe what you project onto is more scary than what it is. You know, you ever get that experience going back and watching something that you scared you as a kid and seeing it afresh? That kind of happens to this character at one point, but from a different point of view. Being in this character's shoes, even though Justice Smith is amazing, I think is really hard because he is so mopey, and it's like he is so down, and it's like, you know, and he is a character who actually has no agency, and that's the whole point of the film. Like he's a character who is scared and terrified and petrified to move on with his life and change things. But I don't know, it's just that's hard to watch, and I found that experience of watching it pretty tough, even though it's full of like these amazing moments and, like you say, great images that are going to stick with me. Yeah, so it's a film I would really recommend to people. But for me, I think the most interesting thing is actually, because I did read that interview where she describes the eggshell moment, and I don't think I would ever got that from just watching the film. I think there's definitely some metaphor or analogy happening, but I don't think it was clear to me anyway from watching it alone that's what it was. I think it's only the fact I know the filmmaker's trans, and then obviously there's some visual clues, like the trans flag is like shown in the background of some shots. That's the only kind of clue you would get to what's going on. It's really quite, to use the word, opaque. Like what's happening is like not clear, and I don't know, I was a bit frustrated by that as well.
But then there are some criticisms of the film that I've seen where they're like, oh, the allegory is like so fucking on the nose that it's like being hit over the head with a mallet.
See, I don't feel that at all.
Yeah, whereas I'm the same as you, where it didn't like click for quite a while. But then there's that bit where something's written on the page. Is it something like it's not too late?
Yeah, there's still time.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, which
and so I get it. I get that it's like on the nose, but maybe I'm just a dumb bitch. And maybe you're a dumb bitch. Maybe we just
I think I'm probably a dumb bitch. You know?
Yeah, I didn't.
I might be wrong about this. I think that like the concept of quote unquote lost time is like a common discussion point within queer circles where people talk about the time they lost before they just accepted and came out to the world. So like that as an idea seems to be like one of the main focuses of the film and like what the horror is all about. But it is strange because once again, this is a film that doesn't necessarily use the vocabulary that queer and straight people use nowadays, and at the same time is trying to kind of convey a weirdly specialist or highly specific feeling specific to those communities. So yeah, that's why I have been seeing people who are like, I don't understand what this film, I don't get what it's about, and at the same time people being like, it's so annoying how heavy-handed and clearly like that's what I'm sort of, I don't know how, like again, watching it a second time around, there's a bunch of stuff where I'm just like, wow, it is so wild and out of order and everything is so, I don't want to get too detailed because that would almost give too much away, but like, so at one point, while they're watching the Pink Opaque, Maddie draws on the back of Owen's neck the logo of the TV show. The following scene shows Owen scrubbing it off in the mirror because his father at least doesn't approve of the TV show. But we don't actually see him removing it. He tries to scrub it off, but it doesn't. Then the scene after that is a week later where he finally confesses to someone, an adult, that he's been lying to his dad.
I don't think it's a week later. I think it's that night. I think he's so terrified because
it's a minor detail thing. It's a week later because that's at Maddie's house that it gets drawn on. He scrubs it off and then he speaks to Maddie, who shares her plan to run away, and then says, next weekend when you come here, we're going to run away. Next weekend is when he's back at the fake parents' house who he's lying to his parents about, that he's claiming to sleep over at this house. And he sort of has this meltdown where he's like, you have to tell my mom I've been lying. And we see in this shot that the back of his neck is like red and scarred. So it's implied that the viewer is led to believe that incomplete scene where Owen is washing the back of his neck, he is successful in removing the mark. But like 20 minutes down the line from this moment, Owen, when he has an emotional reaction rewatching the unresolved cliffhanger of the show, is when his dad, played by Fred Durst, pulls him out of the TV screen and holds his head under scalding water. And that kind of really grasped me, that scene, because I'm like, why is he doing that? What is the metaphor here? He's pulled his head out of the magical TV box that's sucking him away, but what is this meant to be signifying in realist terms? Obviously parental abuse, but why the head under the hot water? And that's when it might occur to you that the reason why, between the scenes where Maddie shares her plan and Owen confesses to the lie, that someone has removed that mark from the back of his neck that he was not able to remove himself. Like, there's just so much in this film. Again, that's something that's so difficult to follow. Like, there's so many minor things in very short scenes that connect to scenes that will either happen immediately after or like 30 minutes after.
Yeah, I read that completely wrong then.
I mean, that's my interpretation of it, because it gives you so little like concrete definitions of what has happened in like the timeline. And Owen is deeply an unreliable narrator, right? Like, he himself makes no acknowledgement of what they were doing when they were watching The Pink Opaque, but Maddie appears and is pointedly trying to tell him that something else happened that he's not acknowledging. But the entire film is told in media res, so it's kind of biased through Owen's interpretation of events. It's a really all over the place script. And I think that the only reason that I tolerate the sheer like span and intertangledness of it is just because, I don't know, like, it's satisfying to my brain to kind of comb over it and find things that I haven't thought of before, you know? So I think that that's sort of the thing. This is a really weird film. It's really hard to get a grip on it. Some people will enjoy wrestling with it, and some people will probably just wish that the film was, you know, a bit more concise and logical.
Well, as much as I would say I probably didn't enjoy much of watching it, like apart from the kind of like more playful moments where it goes into the film and the musical moments, I do want to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
One, because the screen I had was terrible and there was something wrong with it, and two, just because I feel like maybe watching it in a screen with people, I'll have a different experience, you know. So
what did you think, Peter?
I really appreciated it as a piece of filmmaking, and I really liked some of the things that it was doing. It had a sense of doom to it that made it very hard to enjoy. And I think that particularly comes through later on in the film, when like it is a story about someone who is trapped in a life that they didn't necessarily want to lead, which is a powerful thing to put in a film, but is also not particularly fun.
No, it's deeply
to watch.
upsetting.
Yeah, I thought that some of the nods to your Buffys, etc., were a bit too. They were the bits that were kind of a bit too on the nose for me. But I suppose one of the things is that on the noseness is in the eye of the beholder. Like, if you have watched all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, say, in the last, like, 9 months, then you'll be much more attuned to references to it. If you have lived a life as a trans person who has wanted to live in a different gender to the one they were assigned at birth for a very long time, and you've wrestled with all these things, then someone puts them in a film, you might be more likely to think that's a bit obvious. I think it's a film that has like a lot of different strands to it, but that a lot of those different strands are actually bringing together different, quite involved communities where there's a lot of thought has gone into how people interact with the points and the signifiers that they interact with on a daily basis, and that is what makes it quite like dense and difficult to get into. And it's also what allows a filmmaker like Jane Schonebrun to use what I would say is complicated shorthand, where you can bring in quite complex ideas and certain elements of the audience will recognize them straight away and see them straight away as a direct reference or like an indirect reference to something specific, in a way where someone who doesn't have that reference point might be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah. I think you hear that kind of cast list and you hear the synopsis and you maybe can't be ready for how bleak this film is in parts. And there's some very, very dark stuff in it, including one particular bit I don't want to get into, but I actually felt was like quite uncomfortable and bordering on irresponsible. But yeah, there's a lot there. I think you'll get a lot out of it if you watch it, but I think a funny, jolly, fun time.
It is not.
It is not.
I thought it would be like Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that would be the vibe, like a kind of nostalgic. And it's, and to be clear, it's not like a horror in that, like, I could watch it really easily, but it's fucked up.
I think it's one of those, I think I said to Jamie this morning, like, it's a kind of horror where the underpinning emotion is not fear, but tragedy, sadness. Yeah. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, it feels somewhat churlish to do this, but letterbox rankings out of 5. Jamie, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite arbitrary because I'll probably give it a 3 just because I really admire the filmmaking and certain moments of it. But yeah, and I would say go and see it if you're interested. Like, definitely it's like one of the most arresting films I've seen this year. But yeah, don't go in be prepared for like an exciting time or a great time. You know, it's not got lots of joy in it. It's actually incredibly bleak, but people seem to get a lot out of it.
Yeah. Anahit?
I would say 4.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Ellie?
Agreed, 4. Yeah.
4. I also thought 3. I just thought that, very complex film. One of those, well, lots to talk about, though.
Lots to talk
Which
about.
is handy for us as a podcast.
Yeah, and also that is an even 3.5, which is the dream.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like a very 3.5 kind of film, does it? But it's weird how these things kind of average out sometimes. And finally for this week, Jamie's going to talk a little bit about the EIFF program. We will talk about it more fully in the next episode of the podcast, I believe, which is coming out in early August. But Jamie, what's new down EIFF towers?
I was quite interested to see it because it's all changed, isn't it? Like I think EIFF has struggled to have a clear identity over the last couple of years. You know, we know they had the collapse of CMI. They've had like change of directors. You know, people have came in and done good things, but haven't hung around long enough to kind of build a community and kind of like establish themselves. So, yeah, a brand new change this time. It's Paul Rudd has come in, who used to work for Picture House as like he used to buy movies for them. Now he's working for EIFF. He's the new director. And yeah, the program is very different from previous years. It's roughly the same size, I would say, but its focus is quite different. It's much more focused on world premieres this time around. I think about half the films are brand new, so many of them are like competing in this new prize, the Sean Connery competition for Best Feature Film, where they're going to give away a huge amount of money based on the audience award, which sounds like it could be
50 G's, folks. This is
Really?
a 50 big one.
I think this could really be corrupted. You know, like if you.
It's not
Do you have any evidence for that?
It's not the first time. It's not the first time he's made this suggestion.
Hope everyone plays fair.
Now that you've suggested all these ways to not play fair.
But anyway.
I feel like I might have to cut large parts.
Oh, almost certainly.
But anyway, it's quite exciting. I think, you know, the idea of being like an audience who see films for the first time in the world is actually really exciting. And from my point of view as a critic, it's really exciting, and I'm sure it's going to attract like, you know, programmers and sort of like people who work for like trade magazines to come up and see these films for the first time. So that's really cool. So I'll be interested to dip my toe in there. The one thing Edinburgh has struggled with world premieres recently, over the last few years, is getting the kind of creme de la creme. You know, it's like really hard because obviously if you've got a really good film, you probably want to take it to somewhere like Cannes or Berlin, you know, these bigger festivals. So the question is, are they going to bring really good world premieres? That's the big mystery. So hopefully this 50,000 prize has attracted really good films. That's what I'm really excited for. But yeah, another difference is the festival's going to play in a lot of fringe venues. It's going to have cameos, the kind of main hub, but it's also going to spill out into Summerhall. It's going to play in the Red Lecture Theatre. It's going to be at some Edinburgh University venues. So I think that they're trying to make it feel a bit more integrated with the fringe, which is quite a nice idea. Like make it feel like a bit more of the buzz you have at the fringe, and instead of taking you down to like Cineworld, for example, where it feels a little bit dead down there. But if you're in the heart of the fringe, maybe that'll kind of rub off on the kind of film going experience. That's pretty cool. The program itself, we'll probably get into in more detail in a couple of weeks, but it's kind of light on kind of famous filmmakers. I think they've kind of really focused on kind of first time filmmakers. There's a lot of brand new people here who I don't really know. So again, it feels a lot more like a festival of discovery than it has done previously. Maybe going back to like how the festival pitched itself maybe 10, 15 years ago. You know, it really kind of pitched itself as the kind of Sundance of like Europe. And I think maybe that's what it's going for like brand new films, brand new filmmakers, hoping that like every year there's going to be like a couple of standouts who like burst out. So it seems like that's the plan. So quite exciting. But you're going into the unknown. It's full of mystery. But I mean, you know, it does have things that I'm sure we'll talk about on the show, like sort of, you know, the Alice Lowe new film is there, Time Stalker, which looks really fun. There's a few films from Berlin and Cannes which won awards and look really good. So yeah, there's plenty to talk about.
Excellent. And we will talk about it in the fullness of time. And I think that's us for this week. So thank you, Ellie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anahit.
Thank you.
Cheers, Jamie.
Cheers, yeah.
As mentioned, we will be back in 3 weeks. 6th. I know I said the 6th of August, but I think that's when we're recording. I believe it's the 8th of August
I think so.
that our next episode will be out, which will be a big special about the Edinburgh International Film Festival. And we'll all be a week and a half in the Fringe, so we'll be well fed up. If you want some fun energy, then come back for that one. You can follow us on various social things at the Cine Skinny. Like I said, the letterbox has been updated because it's come off my to-do list after several weeks of just being sat there not doing anything. And yes, we will be back shortly. So bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.